Our poem for study today is Invitation to Jane, a brief introduction to the poem. Living in Italy, Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley met with another couple, Edward Williams and Jane William. They ended up living together, spending a lot of time. After Mary had her first miscarriage, she became depressed and Shelley developed an infatuation with Jane because of her skill as a housewife and her musical gifts. Shelley addressed 4 poems directly to Edward's wife, to Jane. The keen star was twinkling, to Jane, the invitation to Jane, and the recollection, and with a guitar to Jane. These are the most compelling lyrics of the group of his love poem because they celebrate particular meeting between the poet and Jane and register Shelley's fascination with Jane's musical talent and imply the pull of Mary's silent priority as a legal spouse and former maternal erotic passion. Though Shelley's actual relationship to Jane remains a mystery to scholars, she appears to have been the last long line of feminine maternal figures, beginning with Elizabeth Shelley, who captured the poet's attention and often brought his obsession with maternal power to the surface. In his invitation, Shelley compares Jane's effect on him to the effect of a fair day on the rough year just awake in his cradle on the break, imagining that as the brightest hour of the unborn spring rouses and nurtures a winter morn, so Jane bathes him in smile, kisses, and the music of frozen seem free to become fountain. The content of this specific poem to Jane is basically Shelley asking Jane to run away with him into the embrace of nature without constraint, rules and regulation of society. This is shown by the quote, away from men and town. Each encounter with Jane establishes Shelley as a signifying subject, but in the process distances him from the bliss which become the source of musical expression, a poetic language. Kristeva writes that the semiotic Kura is indifferent to language, enigmatic and feminine, offering a possible explanation for why Jane appears as a non-linguistic abstraction in each of the 4 poems, expressing herself in the keen stars were twinkling, for instance, in the form of a dear voice, which expresses itself in the form of a gesture, notes, and the tone rather than in words. The text reading, best and brightest come away, fair far than this fair day, which like thee to those in sorrow comes to bid a sweet good morrow to the rough year just awake in his cradle on the brave, the brightest hours of the unborn spring, through the winter wandering, found it seemed the helicon morn. The poet eulogizes the beautiful Jane, to her February born, bending from heaven in azure mirth, it kissed the forehead of the earth and smiled upon the silent sea, and bade the frozen stream be free, and awaken to music all the fountains, and breathe upon the frozen mountain. And like a prophetess of May, strewed flowers upon the barren way, making the wintry world appear like one on whom thou smilest, dear. So each of the three stanzas seem to take a different stand on how to persuade Jane to run away with him. The first is wooing and linkens her to the beauty of nature. The second attempts to portray all of the aspects of life as it is that oppresses feeling and action. You with the unpaid bill despair, and the third becomes more pleading and forceful and suggests that if they run away together in the lap of nature, it will serve to hide them from the rest of the world. And the pool where the winter rains image all the roof of the world, and where the winter rain images all the roof of the leaves. The rhyme scheme of the poem is AABBCC, which differs from many of Shelley's other lyrics, where they are free verse indicating the naturalness of the spirit and earth. This could show that Shelley feels as if he has to restrain himself as Jane being married. The invitations seem to preserve its calm and happy mood throughout. It describes Shelley's growing love for Jane, a maternal feminine figure. However, when we look at it into the detail, a darker mood can also be observed. For example, the Helicon day, which seems to him the birth of the brightest hour of the unborn spring, in fact lasts briefly. He compares Jane with this unsure and transient day. Alliteration similarly creates a bright and hopeful tone to the poem, seemingly trying to show her that life with him will be joyous. Best and brightest come away. This generates an atmosphere of persuasiveness, as if he is trying to serenade Jane into living with him. As in the most of Shelley's poetry, personification is used, presenting the idea that the earth is supportive of his plan. It kisses the forehead of the earth. Kissing someone's forehead usually connotes giving a blessing. In this poem, Shelley tries to justify his feeling of lust too for Jane by likening them to something as natural, as good as nature, and so meaning that they must be pure. The presence of Jane makes the world seem alive to Shelley, making the wintry world appear like one on whom thou smilest, dear. So his wintry world is smothered by Jane, and she appears the smiling, twinkling love for the poet. Shelley also uses words linking with the new growth and fertility, unborn spring. This could indicate that Shelley believes that the love has yet to grow and flower and blossom, and symbolize that human nature runs parallel with nature, and so it is inevitable their love will blossom with the incoming spring. So the invitation opens with comparison of Jane with the coming of the new morning, the smiling morning, the effect of premature moment of unborn spring on the rough year just awake in his cradle on the break, to Jane's effect as best and brightest on Shelley. Not only is the relationship maternal and erotic, with Jane waking, kissing and breathing new life into Shelley, in the same way the Helicon morn, like a prophetess of May, bade the frozen stream be free, and wake to music all their fountain. it is also aesthetic. Jane awakens the poet to love, beauty, and song. Shelley fantasizes that Jane's relation to him would exist at the same non-linguistic level on which a fairy would relate to the rough year just awake. Her influence on him works predominantly through physical gesture, manifestation itself in bend, a kiss, a smile, a bid, and a breath. And he remains the dependent, childlike recipient. Jane's gesture to this point, in fact, prepare Shelley for the language of poetry. His portrayal of this exchange resonating with Kristeva's description of the early stages of human development, where mother figure plays an important role in hugging, kissing, and smothering the child. The casino forest coalesces in Shelley's mind with that same world far from ours, where music and moonlight and feeling are one. Shelley imagines that he and Jane will venture away from men and town to the wild wood and the down, to the silent wilderness where the soul needs not repress its music lest it should not find an echo in another's mind, while the touch of nature's art harmonizes heart to heart. The forest is a place of unity for the lover, not separation, of shared essence and identity, not repulse and disappointment. A wild realm, the forest as Shelley projects it, is a feminine, maternal place outside the boundaries of masculine, paternal order. Consistent with the outlook Shelley articulates in an essay on love, men and towns in the world of this poem, as they usually do in romance, counter the laws of the Kora because they threaten free nature. The relationship between them seems completely one-sided. Shelley has an infatuation with Jane, and the persuasive manner of the poem indicates that she did not feel the same or did not show it. This persuasiveness is shown in the commands during the third stanza: awake, arise, and come away. In spite of the generally pleasant import of these lines, he makes the rhyme scheme unpleasant: away, day, sorrow, and morrow. To add to this implied sadness, he deliberately provides the ominous element which incessantly undermines the ephemeral paradise of this poem in the form of personification of the sad concepts. Reading further the next stanza, I leave this notice on my door for each accustomed visitor: I'm gone into the fields to take what the sweet hours yield. Reflection, you may come tomorrow, sit by the fireside with sorrow. You with the unpaid bill despair, you tiresome verse reciter care. I will pay you in the grave, death will listen to your stave. Personified concepts appear as if they were actors on the stage, and the poet is the supposed director, directs each to keep away from him for the sake of moments of his happiness. So he leaves the notice on the door for every visitor to his place that I'm gone to the field to take enjoyment in the hour. So reflection, that's the sad thought, can come tomorrow, can wait, sitting by the fireside. Similarly, the unpaid bill causing despair can wait for another day. And the tiresome verse reciter, that's the poet, will pay in the grave, because death will listen to his part, his poem. Expectation too be of today is for itself enough. Hope in the pity mock not woe, which smiles not follow where I go. Long having lived on your sweet food, at length I find one moment's good after long pain with all your love. This you never told of me. So even in the midst of happiness with Jane, he is conscious of and tries to expel these unhappy and discouraging worldly thoughts, personified in the form of expectation, hope, because and woes, because she is smiling upon him and offering him the sweet food for his nourishment. Ironically, they will come back to him in the sequential poem The Recollection. For example, the personified reflection appears again as a memory in the next poem. This ironical relation between the cause, the poet's dismissal of unhappy concept, and the result, this formidable recurrence, dramatically links the invitation and the recollection like two acts of some love lyric and love drama. Continuing with the text, the reading of the text: radiant sister of the day, awake, arise and come away to the wild woods and the plains and the pools where winter reigns. Image all their roof of leaf, where the pine its garland weaves of sapless green and ivy dun, a round stem that never kissed the sun. There the lawns and pasture be, and the sad hill and the sand hill of the sea, where the melting hoar frost wets the daisy start that never sets, and windflower and violets, which yet join not sent to hue, crown the pale year weak and new. Then the night is left behind, and the deep east dun and blind, and the blue moon is over us, and the multitudinous billow murmur at our feet. There the earth and ocean meet, and all things seems only one in the universal sun. So the range of images in the closing stanza of the invitation eventually leads us to conclude that the poem's peaceful mood is superficial, transitory, ephemeral. There are two significant images: the recess of the pine trees and the night which is imagined at noon. The recess is described as discording with the poem's harmonious world. The nook is strangely excluded from the sunny ideal world, for all things seems only one in the universal sun. Quite contrary to the lively outer world, the nook is hidden and confined by sapless green and ivy dun, as if it were an embodiment of the unpleasant concept which he tried to dispel. If we can interpret this nook as the dark side of the poet's mind, it indicates that he recognizes the ephemeral nature and the sad consequences of his love for Jane. The coiling plans too are possibly symbolic of his psychological trouble he experiences in love. It's difficult for us to define the nature of Shelley's love for Jane William, but it seems certain, however, that his last days, when he was in love with this woman, were among the happiest and the calmest in his life. A mood of calm can be noted in this poem addressed to Jane, especially the invitation, or in the form of invitation. Thank you.